Good evening. My name is Terry Knight, and I'm a school counselor at Bel Air High School. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm excited about the topic we're going to share, executive functioning. We're into our 6th month of the school year, and many of our students are struggling with skills needed to be successful in their daily functioning. Executive functioning is one of those skills. I'm hopeful that tonight's information will assist us in engaging in new conversations to develop some creative solutions for our students. We're fortunate this evening to have Amy Bland as a presenter. Ms. Bland is a certified and licensed speech-language pathologist and owns Phoenix Speech Therapy in Forest Hill. She has over 17 years of comprehensive experience in speech-language pathology and has worked extensively with young adults and teenagers who exhibit executive functioning disorder, ADHD, and post-concussion syndrome to address self-determination, organization, planning, time management, and task initiation. After this presentation, if there are some questions, we'll have an opportunity for Ms. Bland to share answers with you. Welcome, Ms. Bland.
Hi, thank you everyone and good evening. Thank you for sharing your time with all of us as we dive into the world of executive function skills and executive function coaching. I want to thank Bel Air High School and especially the counseling team for the invitation to chat about how we as both professionals and parents can support our students to become successful adults. So as Ms. Knight said, yes, I am a speech-language pathologist, but I'm also a mom of 2 teenage boys in grades 8 and 10, and I am living the teenage dream with all of you. So tonight you're going to hear me share some experiences of families that I've worked with, as well as my own sons. And I hope by the end of this presentation that I leave you with some strategies, maybe some different mindsets with how you can work with your own students to become independent adults. All right, let's dive into this. So the words that you see on this first slide are pretty common when people think about executive function skills. It's starting to become much more popular in social media and online presence, but these are only a small sample of the different skills that we need. I think any of us would agree that in order to be a successful and independent adult that lives alone, that manages a household, that works at a job, we have to do all of these things every day. So we can also take a step back and recognize that our students are using these same skills in the academic arena, at school, maybe in extracurricular activities, and driving. Yes, driving. Let's talk about that for a second. So we have many of our students are learning to drive or are currently driving. And yes, they need to learn the mechanics of driving and response time and reaction time and so forth. But they also need to be able to do all of these skills as well. They need to know where they're going. They need to plan for it. They need to manage their time. They need to understand, how do I problem solve if they're doing road work, there's an accident, they're detouring traffic. All of these things are going to play a role. And I bring that up because executive function skills are lifelong skills. They will carry over into everything that we do. So for a second, let's think about executive function skills as the how. How do we do this? And we can almost think of it as the workers. So students can have difficulties or challenges in these areas where maybe it's not completely developed, or maybe they just need a little bit more support, more of a boost. And that's where we can come in as parents and professionals to help them to continue on their way to independence. So these are the executive function skills, well, a small set of them. And we also need to be aware of the executive function system. So if we're sticking with the whole metaphor of executive function skills as workers, the executive function system are the managers. They are the awareness system of saying, okay, this is when you should be doing this. So sometimes what we see with our students is that they're well organized, they know how to plan, they know how to maybe prioritize their work, but yet they're still having situations where they're having NHIs or not handed in work. Work is being handed in late. And so that likely is a situation where they're not 100% sure of when they should be submitting something. So sometimes the skills are there, but the executive function system, that higher system that tells them when to do something, is not fully developed and should be supported by us. So a lot of this is awareness, and throughout this presentation tonight, that skill, awareness, is key really for moving from being a teenager and adolescent into an adult. One thing to be aware of is that the adolescent brain really is not fully developed until age 25. So let's take a breath for a second, parents. That does not mean that your student will be living with you through their mid-20s. Not 100%. But what that means likely is that all of their systems will be developed, but they may need some help living on their own with bigger decisions, like there's a home repair, there's a water leak. What do I do? What do I prioritize? How do I plan? How am I efficient with this? Perhaps they want to make a big purchase, like a car. That takes a lot of higher thinking skills, and they may have some of it, but may still be asking you for some support. So I think it's important for us as parents to recognize that although they have grown and developed and matured into their high school years, they still have many more years of development. And so we have to be aware of our role. What I've listed below are some things that we can do as parents that really helps this development continue to occur. So yes, I have social communication face-to-face as number one. I am a speech language pathologist, and yes, I am a little biased, but there is a lot of research out there that says that this is by far one of the most important things we can do for our teens. So we're all living in a pandemic. We're 2 years in. We all can agree that speaking virtually through a computer screen is very, very different from speaking face-to-face. It's different even with a mask on or mask off. And I'm going to take it one step further and say to really activate those executive function systems when you're having the social communication face-to-face, it's fantastic for you to have your teens engage in a debate-like conversation where they hear other opinions, other thoughts. We want to encourage that flexible thinking and that it's not just one opinion. There are many different opinions, many different ways of looking at a certain topic or idea. Then we move into aerobic exercise. Anyone that has worked out or has tried to stay with a workout routine will tell you that it feels really good both physically and mentally after either doing some sort of cardiovascular exercise or walking, and that is because all of the oxygen is moving very quickly to our brains, and our brains move very efficiently with that. So for our teens and our students, certainly encourage aerobic exercise, even if it's just walking. If they are students that really enjoy working out in the gym, encourage that, reinforce that. On the flip side, we also have research supporting meditation and mindfulness. So this is addressing more of how our students feel when they feel very stressed. They could be stressed because of the change of workload. Maybe there's been a transition. They could be stressed because of schedules or because things have changed. Certainly, we've seen a lot of stressors moving from virtual or distance learning back to in-person learning with a mask, without a mask, social distancing. There's been a lot of changes. So meditation and mindfulness does not have to be 30 minutes, 1 hour block. In fact, the research shows that 1 to 3 minutes of mindfulness or meditative breathing really is very beneficial. As we all know, there's an app for everything. There's plenty of apps for this. If you have a student that really enjoys yoga, that's helpful. Tai Chi is helpful. There is also meditative type breathing for 1 or 2 minutes. So there's a lot of wonderful resources out there, and I certainly have seen it be beneficial across the board. Okay, positive belief system. We know as adults that we're faced with challenges every day, right? So we may think the day's going to go one way and something changes and we have to kind of roll with it. If our teens and our students enter into this, whatever situation they're in, whether it's school or new job or whatever, with a positive belief system, whatever obstacles or challenges come their way, they're going to be in a better place with mindset as to, okay, I can handle this. It's going to be all right, versus a negative belief system. The last thing I have on here is sleep inertia, and that might be a new term. It was a new term for me a couple of years ago, but we all experience it. It is that lovely fog that we all have when we first wake up. And they did some research on this, and they did some brain studies, and to no surprise, our executive function system is not activated when we first wake up. It takes a little bit to wake up that system. So what that means is that we want to make sure that our students and our teens aren't doing anything during that time that would require higher thinking, like driving. So if your student is an early riser and a morning person, they may only need 5 minutes for things to start being activated and for them to move forward. But some of us have teens, myself included, that take a lot longer. So what we can do as parents is make sure that our teens are hopefully getting as much sleep as possible, but I will tell you, mine like to stay up late, and it's always a conversation. And then when they're waking up early in the morning, make sure they have enough time before they're walking out the door to make sure, yes, they're coherent and they're speaking to me and they're making sense and they're kind of past that fog. So that's what I meant by sleep inertia. So I put this up here and we're going to visit it again. This may match the expectations that you would consider for a high school student, or it may not. It's not lost on me that a 9th grader is going to be very, very different than a 12th grader, just maturity and experiences and exposures that they've had. But in general, as they move out of high school, so junior, senior year, you can see a lot of these expectations, we're looking at independence and being able to manage things effectively. So let's move forward and kind of see how this all works. In the very first slide, or second slide, I talked to you about executive function skills, and I gave you the ones that are the most popular that I see online. These are the ones from Dr. McCloskey that are researched. He shared that after years and years of research, they have found that there are actually 33 self-regulation skills, which are in fact executive function skills, that we all do every day. That's a lot. That is a lot to do. And maybe now, as parents, we can see why the brain isn't fully developed until age 25. So one thing to be aware of is that you can certainly have, and we all do, different levels of development with all of these. But if we take a look at all these 33 skills, know that all of us are doing this every day. So the one piece of advice that I would suggest for your students is know that they have been self-regulating all day in school. And that may mean a couple different things. It may mean that they are behaving appropriately, they're doing what's expected, they are keeping it together. When they come home from school, it's really important for us as parents to make sure they have time to decompress in a safe space where they do something mindless and they just have time to kind of reset and recharge. And that time frame is going to be different for every student, but that's one thing that I would certainly recommend. Those 33 self-regulation skills have been grouped into what they call clusters, and you can see there are 7 of them. And again, all of these certainly play a role in the academic world, but also across life. One thing I want to point out about this is that the brain is fascinating and amazing. So it's not a situation where your student has to be completely developed in attention before moving into engagement. No, it's actually a number of systems developing all at once and they're overlaying. So it is quite fascinating to see, but sometimes can make it a little tricky to understand what exactly is the area that is changing or is being challenged. So let's connect the dots. Self-regulation, which I was just speaking about, is in the moment. That is happening right now. So like I said, they're self-regulating all day in school or all day at a job or wherever. Self-realization and self-determination are planning for the next few days, so kind of looking ahead. Now the key here is that the connection between these systems has to be developed. And that's where it gets a little interesting. So self-realization, we all know as parents and professionals that work with teenage students. It's not a bad thing necessarily, but normally what we say, at least in my household, are the eye rolls, a little bit of attitude, a little bit of, I can do this, I don't need your help, I've got it. And it's good that they have this. It develops between ages 10 and 14, and then once they have it, there's no going back. But it's almost kind of like having a new boss that really doesn't know what the job is. So it's there, but it's not really fully developed. And so it's part of our job to help develop that, but we might be met with a little bit of resistance because our teens are going to think they've got it. Okay, so let's talk about self-determination. So self-determination is fantastic, and it's definitely something that we as parents and professionals want to support and encourage and activate. I have this picture of a swimmer who's certainly a competitive swimmer. I'm not sure if he's in the Olympics or not. I'm all about the Olympics right now. But I think we would all agree that you don't wake up one day and the next day you're swimming competitively, right? There's a number of steps that have to get there, and there has to be a drive. So self-determination is like your teenager or your student's inner drive. I want to do this so badly that I am going to make a plan, I'm going to stick with it, and I'm going to overcome challenges. So how do we help them activate that self-determination system? This is called motivational interviewing. It's a fancy term, but it's really very helpful, and anybody can do it. So you can do it as a parent, teacher, counselor, myself. Basically, you're going to sit down with your student and you're going to have a conversation with them about what is it that they want to do. And to be quite honest, it could be anything. It could be as short term as I don't want to have any more NHIs this month or this quarter or this semester or whatever. It could be I want to get my driver's license. I want to apply for college. I want to make the team. In fact, I have a student right now I'm working with, and when I said, what are you looking forward to? What are you excited about? And he said, I want to be the starting running back for the football team. Okay, so then as parents, we do something called reflexive questioning. And reflexive questioning is a shift in mindset for us. It's where we are making them do the work. So I'm going to tell you ahead of time, this takes patience and persistence, but it's well worth the investment. So the conversation with me and the student kind of went like this. Okay, well, what would you need to do to be able to make the team or to be a starter? What would it take? Well, I don't know. I don't know what it would take. Okay, well, what would your coach say that you would have to do? Oh, well, coach would say that I have to be conditioned. I have to be able to run a sprint at this amount of time. So he knew the information. It was just finding that perspective. So once he said that, then we were able to start talking about a plan. Okay, so you talked about conditioning. What does conditioning mean? What are you actually doing? So you are supporting your student and you are helping them talk through the plan, but it's all coming from them. And at the end of the day, that's the key. The key is it has to come from them. It cannot be our goal. It has to be their goal, whatever it is. And it can be, you can start with a very short-term goal. It doesn't have to be this big long-term goal. In fact, sometimes it's better to start with a short one so they can evaluate and see how that works. It's also important to include obstacles or challenges. We know as adults that things happen that are out of our control, and so we want to prepare our students so they can see, oh, this might happen, and if this happens, this is how I'm going to handle it. If there's a plan and there's no conversation about obstacles or challenges, and that challenge occurs, it could really take away some of their confidence, and it may confuse them a little bit. You said we were going to do this plan, this was going to work, right? So we want to be able to capture all of that, as well as help them understand flexible thinking. This is great though, when you ask your student what obstacles or challenges they may face with whatever plan they're doing, you may be surprised at what they share with you. Certainly as an adult, I'm thinking of what challenges it would be for that student to make the football team. But that is not what his challenge was for him. He said his challenge was that he didn't feel like he was big enough, and that's why he wanted to condition and so forth. So, you know, definitely listen to your students, but use the reflexive thinking. It's very, very helpful. So when we talk about planning, we do have to understand future time, and future time is looking ahead. As adults, we're very, very good about understanding what a month looks like, or a year ahead, or so forth. We're able to do that largely because our brains are fully developed, but also because we have experiences to draw from. Our students aren't quite there yet. They can actually see 6th to 12th grade 2 to 3 days ahead of time. So if we have students that have tests or exams or portfolios or projects due 2 or 3 weeks out, they absolutely can still plan and prioritize for that. But just know that they're going to need support to see beyond 3 days. And that's where we can come in to help them. Understanding future time is important, but another important piece of the plan is being able to visualize that plan happening. That's really kind of tapping into nonverbal working memory, but it's tapping into that to see, oh, I actually can see it happening. I can see me gearing up for football, and I can see me running the sprint, and I can see me catching the ball, actually very specific things. So those are some other techniques that are helpful. So this segues into study skills. This is also a fun challenge that I give to all of you. Ask your student, do they know how to study? And if they say, oh yeah, sure, I know how to study, great. How do you study? And how do you study for history versus how do you study for math, right? Because those are two different areas. You may be very surprised, as I was a few years ago, that I thought my student, my son, knew how to study, and actually he was just completely relying on reading and hoping it stuck. So teach a few strategies. Show them what works for you. Show them what maybe works for a friend of yours or someone else you know, or something you've looked up. Let them choose the strategy. It's interesting. Students will tend to lean into the one that they feel will be most natural for them. And more times than not, that is the one that works the best. So let them be the lead here again. Just as important, once they do the strategy and they sit down and they take the test, after they're finished taking the test, ask them for some feedback. Have them self-evaluate. Was that successful? When you sat down, did you feel comfortable? When you looked at the questions, did you think, oh, this isn't that bad? I actually know this stuff. If it's successful, have them take just a notebook or a copybook and write down what that strategy was. I used this type of studying strategy for history and it was a success. So that the next time they have a history test, they can look back to that reference book and see that worked. Feedback is really, really important for our students. Immediate and frequent feedback is one of the best recommendations I can give to parents So yes, of course, we want to tell them that was a great job. You did fantastic. That was successful. Great job. We also want to let them know when maybe it didn't work out. Do you think that that worked out? Have them kind of evaluate that, because again, you want them to really be the driver here. No, it didn't work out. Okay, why don't you think it worked out? And have that conversation. And then, okay, you're right, that didn't work out. What could you do the next time? Or how could you modify this? So that's important too. These are some strategies that I use. I'm going to be quite honest with you. There's probably 2 more pages of strategies that I like to use, but these are the ones I use most frequently. Just like anybody else, our students are different, so there's different variations, you know, mixing different things, but the ones that I always use would be reflexive questioning, which we chatted about a little bit earlier. I always give immediate and frequent feedback, and visualization is really important for our students. It's really difficult for them to execute a plan if they can't see it before it begins. And sometimes we might be surprised at where our students are with visualization. I have one student I'm working with right now who we actually had to do, we were doing it virtually, so I couldn't see what he was doing on the other end, and I had him visualize something, and he actually shared his screen and said, oh, I found a visualizer app, and had done all of the work there. So certainly we want to use their own imagination. But like I said, these are a handful of different strategies that I use. External aids would refer to things like planners and calendars and so forth. There's different apps as well, but we do want them to be the driver. So now let's take a look back at these expectations for our high school students, and hopefully you can kind of see all the different self-regulation skills and systems that they need to have in place in order for this to be consistent. One word about consistency. As our students are learning these new skills, please be aware that you're going to see kind of this up and down success rate. Sometimes they're going to do it really well, and then other times it's going to be what we think is the same task, and it's not going to be as easy. And that's normal, and that's okay. And that's just letting us know they need some support. A lot of this is repetition, and really strengthening those executive function skills that they just haven't had a lot of opportunity to try. So the name of the game here is self-awareness. If we can make sure that our teens are aware of what they're doing, how they're doing it, and when they're doing it, they're going to go a long way, and absolutely independence can be achieved. So here are my references. Like I said, there's a lot of information out there. Certainly there is information specific to ADHD and ADD, but quite honestly, there's a lot of students with executive function difficulties that aren't diagnosed with ADD or ADHD and can benefit. And I truly believe everyone can benefit. So, Ms. Knight, do we have any general questions that I can answer?
Not at this time.
Okay, so if anything comes up or you have something very specific that you'd like to chat with me about, I'd love a consultation. I love to talk through some situations and be helpful. There's my information, phone number, email. We also have a website, Facebook, and Instagram. But certainly, I appreciate the time tonight, and I hope that everyone took a little bit of something away from this that they can help their students with.